Notwithstanding so many attributions, was the Senate in a condition to guarantee the Republic from the ambition of the executive power? A government of 3 magistrates, re-eligible every 10 years, substituted for 5 magistrates, elected only for 5 years, who could not be re-elected, appeared still to be a great deal too strong for many suspicious minds. Sieyès hesitated whether or not to limit the authority of the consuls to 5 years, but it appeared preferable to him not to limit too much the time and to establish a repression always existing for cases of public danger. Although the consulate, totally a stranger to the legislative and judiciary powers, had only the number 3 in common with the Roman triumvirate, it was quite evident that it was there that most probably someday might spring forth tyranny. It was then against the probability above all that the legislator was right in directing the conservative power. In some ancient states and in the Middle Ages, they banished the citizens whose power they feared. Ostracism, exile, had appeared the sole remedy against that mortal malady of the republics, but ostracism had 2 faults, which balanced the advantages. First, it was in the highest degree unjust, since it punished an influence acquired perhaps by civic virtues. Not only did it deprive the state of Aristides and Themistocles, but it inflicted on Aristides and Themistocles the most cruel and the longest torture of human life, exile. Exile, without a term, far from one's country. The fear of suffering that terrible torment, might it not precipitate a feeble mind into the career of usurpation? If anything could ever excuse tyranny and civil war, was it not the terrible sort of exile suspended over the head of a citizen sufficiently illustrious to excite envy? The injustice of ostracism went evidently in that respect against the aim of the legislator. Second, ostracism, punishment imposed without judgment, was it at least imposed by an authority calm, enlightened, and deliberate? On the contrary, it was the crowd who pronounced in the agitation of the forum, always open to the poison of hatred, to the prejudices of the moment, to the seductions of intrigue, the multitude condemned without appeal. And Archippus was powerless. How then ameliorate ostracism? How preserve this heroic remedy of the republics in stripping it of its injustice and in giving to those victims of glory a guarantee against the caprices of envy? Sieyès proposed confiding the right of absorption to the same body who sanctioned the laws and whose unremovability, high position, and interest of conservatism rendered more useful and less dangerous to exercise of an extraordinary censure. By this right of absorption, the Senate could absorb, that is to say, call into its own bosom the consul who appeared dangerous to the liberty of the republic. The consul absorbed ceased at the same moment his functions and began, ipso facto, member of the Senate. The statesman suspected was not thus condemned to drag on the remainder of his life far from his countrymen. He was only reduced to yield to another the post he occupied. He had not to choose between revolt and torment, of which the ministers and deputies, quietly seated at their domestic hearths, do not all appear to understand the cruelty. If the suspicious of the Senate were just, the absorption saved the state and preserved from crime him who was about to commit it. If the suspicions were unjust, the absorbed quitted only his place for another, and he found himself seated for the rest of his days upon the curule chair. Certainly such an ostracism had no longer anything odious in it. Sieyès had completely, admirably resolved the problem, but the absorption could deprive the republic of the services of a great citizen of the government. Our republic does not. It is without doubt superfluous to repeat here that I speak of the project of reform that Sieyès has meditated, that we had approved of with a profound enthusiasm, and that he would have given to France if he had been sufficiently powerful to have done it. A part of these ideas were preserved in the Constitution of the year 8. But what is a system disjointed and divided on all sides? It is sufficient for one single article to be omitted or added to spoil the whole. The conservative Senate, deprived of its right of absorption, was only able to preserve itself. What shall we say of the senators called against the fundamental principles of their institution to all the first employments of the government? I will only speak here then of the primitive project. The modification of that project will occupy us hereafter. Without the return of Napoleon, would our Republican reform have succeeded? Probably we should have been overcome by the party of Jourdan. I think that this unexpected return preserved France from a repetition of the terror which Jourdan and several of his friends would have in vain attempted to moderate. There were more chance against us than for us, but the fear of a new revolution, government merited that we should expose our heads. We should only have kept them a few days longer if the times of 1793 had returned.